Incredible moment revealed, Black woman surprises pilots with transformative strength in crisis. The hum of engines roared like a distant storm as Michelle adjusted her uniform, smoothing out the fabric over her abdomen. It felt simultaneously empowering and constricting, a daily reminder of the confines society imposed on her ambition. She had spent too many years serving coffee and snacks, temporarily leaving the pilot's seat for a cushioned, overcrowded aisle. But today, the vibrant buzz of conversation among passengers framing her narrow world suddenly shifted. What if today was the day? The relentless dream of being a pilot gnawed at her, filling her with an odd mix of determination and despair. She longed for independence not just for herself, but for Ava, her precious daughter. The thought of Ava's future haunted Michelle like a ghost. What would it mean for a Black woman to soar through the skies when society had already laid claim to who could fly? Would she ever rise above the labels others cast upon her? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The unexpected lurch of the plane jolted her back to reality, pulling her away from her spiraling thoughts. A ripple of panic cascaded through the cabin. She glanced to the cockpit, dread pooling in her stomach as a flurry of voices erupted from the front. The pilot, a seasoned figure with years of experience, had collapsed, leaving chaos in his wake. The co-pilot, wide-eyed and frozen, looked through the small glass window to Michelle, the tension palpable. It happened faster than she could process. In that moment, her years of training collided with instinct. She knew the protocols, every emergency procedure drilled into her mind with relentless repetition. But did she possess the strength required for this singular moment? A knot tightened in her chest. The passengers who had once undervalued her began to regard her with uncertainty. Could she really command a cockpit instead of simply serving drinks? As she slipped through the cabin, uncertainty clawed at her. Passengers eyed her, a timid child with a stuffed animal gripped tightly in her arms, a focused businessman who had unintentionally ushered doubt into the air. Their assumptions weighed heavily. Could they ever see her as more than a flight attendant? Were they aware of the depths of her desire, the complexities of her existence? Michelle. We need you, the co-pilot's plea sliced through the haze of doubt. Each heartbeat pounded in her ears, a deafening reminder of the stakes, all eyes now on her, mnemonics of their biases laid bare. The nagging fear that she was not enough surged to the forefront. What if she faltered? What if they all paid the price of her hesitance? As the plane hurtled towards the ground, a desperate feeling of anguish washed over her. A moment hung suspended in time, the weight of her aspirations pressed heavily on her shoulders. She stood at the precipice, a decision looming that could change everything, not just for her but for those she loved. The horizon of possibility stretched endlessly ahead, but so did the fear of failure. How would she reclaim her right to fly? And could she embrace the moment and rise above the limits of history? The world awaited her next move, as did Ava, her small hands clutching onto hope for something extraordinary. The din of chaos faded as Michelle steadied herself, closing her eyes for a heartbeat to focus. The frenetic energy around her was a tempest, yet in the eye of that storm, clarity surfaced. No longer merely the woman delivering drinks, she was primed for something irrevocably profound. Michelle, the co-pilot's voice cracked through her reverie, laden with panic. We need you in here now. Each step felt precarious as she navigated toward the cockpit, anxiety gnawing at her resolve. The cramped quarters were a stark contrast to the open skies she fantasized about. She pushed through the cockpit door, instinctively brushing back the projecting doubt. The pilot lay crumpled, and the co-pilot's shaking hands clutched the controls as if they were his only tether to sanity. Can you operate the radio? He demanded, glancing at her. His eyes searched hers, searching for a flicker of assurance, of capability. "Yes," she replied, her voice steadying as she forged past her fear. Deep within, she knew the protocols back and forth and found comfort in this knowledge. There was a flicker of something transformative as she activated the radio. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Flight 482. We have an emergency." The words crackled through the speaker, each syllable marked by urgency. The co-pilot's gaze softened for the briefest moment, as if he were beginning to see her potential shine through the haze of crisis. Feeling the warmth of purpose bloom inside her, Michelle could finally sense the alchemy of her existence shifting. "Okay. Adjust the altitude to stabilize," he instructed, his fingers flicking over the controls with frenetic energy. Yet, his focus was split between the technical aspects of flying the plane and the whirlwind of emotions swirling around them, the shared vulnerability that accompanied their situation. Michelle slipped into the right seat, her heart pounding as she took control of the radio, shutting out the other voices that clamored for her attention. She wanted to prove herself, but more than that, she longed for authenticity in her experience. "What altitude are we at?" 2,500. He swallowed hard, eyes darting nervously between her and the harrowing expanse beyond the cockpit window. Michelle's mind raced. Stability meant more than physical control, it reached into the very fabric of the lives affected. Thoughts of Ava collided with her resolve. How could she demonstrate strength to her daughter, to show her that defying expectations was possible? In that split second, she realized she could be an agent of change not just for herself, but for every woman of color who dared to dream beyond societal constraints. The urgency propelled her forward, rerouting the panic that had once consumed her. "I'm going to take the controls," Michelle stated, surprising even herself with the conviction in her voice. The co-pilot hesitated but relinquished his grasp. Michelle gripped the yoke tightly, her vision sharpening. She felt the resistance from the aircraft, an embodiment of both her fear and her determination. "Trust yourself," she whispered, not just to the plane but to the echo of her aspirations too. In this moment, she wasn't the girl who had served coffee, she was a pilot. "Adjust speed to the cockpit," alarms blared, jolting her focus. Every sense heightened in the face of adversity. "Don't overreact," she cautioned herself, feeling a simultaneous mix of dread and exhilaration. A revelation struck her: this crisis was an opportunity for transformation. As her fingers danced over the controls, the outside world faded. Everything that had once held her back coalesced into a singular force propelling her forward. She could sense the shifting balance between audacity and fear, aware that in this moment, she was inextricably tied to her fate and to that of the passengers trembling behind her. Just as the plane stabilized, the sudden silence of the engines momentarily enveloped them. The looming question clicked in her mind: would she keep flying or face the unyielding trials of doubt that awaited her now that she had dared to transcend expectations? The horizon shimmered ahead, calling her to navigate it. But with every gain comes another challenge, and as decisions rested heavier on her shoulders, the true test of her journey lay just ahead, waiting to unfold. In a heartbeat, Michelle's perception shifted from chaos to clarity. The aircraft stabilized under her grip, an anchor amidst volatility. Each breath she drew pulled in confidence like air into sails. She felt the plane rise beneath her guidance. "Good, you're holding it," the co-pilot shouted, his voice infused with urgency and growing trust. "Now we need to ascend to 2,700 feet. We might have to fly through turbulence ahead." Facing uncertainty, Michelle's mind raced. An anxious flutter broke the calm she had just found. The aircraft's systems were all foreign to her, yet something deep within sparked a resolve. She had not simply stepped into the cockpit, she had crossed a threshold into an unexpected realm of agency and responsibility. The irony was not lost on her. She had always performed her role with fidelity and service, yet here she was, elevated beyond expectation. "Climb to 2,700, she repeated to herself, as if it were a mantra to ward off doubt. With trembling fingers, she adjusted the yoke, feeling the aircraft respond almost immediately, a symphony of metal and mechanics making her feel both powerful and fragile. with each additional foot gained, a flicker of exhilaration surged through her. Not only was she piloting a plane, but she was also seizing the opportunity to reshape her narrative. This crisis began to glow with promise. Could her narrative shift from servant to leader? But then it struck her, the turbulent air was not merely a challenge of flight. It reflected a turbulence in her life, where she was expected to be anything but extraordinary. The pressures weighed heavily on her, threatening to pull her back toward a past where she merely played a supporting role. The fear of failure loomed, yet intertwined with it was a fierce desire to forge ahead into the airspace of her dreams. "Hold steady, Michelle," she affirmed quietly, focusing her attention on the altitude gauge, monitoring the fluctuations with vigilance. "Do you see the clouds ahead?" The co-pilot's voice cut through her reverie. "Turbulence is unavoidable. Brace yourself, you'll feel it." And there it was, the moment where she had to confront not only the uncertainties of flying but the profound doubts buried deep within her. The clouds clustered ominously, as if mirroring the storm of emotions that coursed through her mind. Could she truly navigate this turbulence and the perceptions of herself that had clouded her vision for so long? Michelle nodded, though inwardly she steeled herself for the challenge. The clouds rolled toward them ominously, and she could feel the aircraft begin to tremble with anticipation. "Michelle, you have to stay focused." The urgency in the co-pilot's voice reminded her of the stakes. Flashes of her past rushed through her mind, the jeering voices that scorned her ambitions, the dismissive attitudes that laughed at her aspirations. No longer could she suffer their noise to drown her spirit. Her knuckles whitened around the yoke. Instead of cowering beneath the pressure, she resolved to face it headfirst, ready to ascend through the storm. "I can do this," she whispered fiercely, and in that affirming breath, she felt the weight of the world shift. The turbulence hit like a sudden gust of wind, throwing the plane off kilter. Michelle adjusted instinctively, recentering her heart and mind. "Keep it level," the co-pilot encouraged, but she couldn't ignore the challenge that lurked just beneath the surface of her focused demeanor. Would she maintain her grip on this opportunity or let it slip away as so many others had before? As the plane jolted again, throwing both pilot and co-pilot into a desperate dance against gravity, Michelle realized the true nature of her pursuit lay not in the flight itself, but in confronting the looming doubts of her identity and purpose. The real test of her strength lay ahead, and she was determined to embrace it. Just as she recalibrated her hold on the yoke and prepared for the next wave of turbulence, her eyes caught sight of something large moving below a shadow. Of another plane crossing their path, her heart raced. In this delicate moment, a new question arose: what if those shadows were not just obstacles, but bridges to new connections, new allies? Would she reach out or hold her course? The horizon seemed to draw nearer, yet the interwoven pathways of her journey beckoned with uncertainty. Fine lines were drawn in her spirit, and as she stood on the precipice of becoming, she steeled herself for the confrontation poised just beyond the clouds. The plane shuddered violently, and a pang of panic twisted in Michelle's stomach. The co-pilot's voice materialized once more, urging her to harness the control that she had just claimed. "You've got this, Michelle. Shift slightly left." His words cut through the chaos, echoing the deeper resolve that was rapidly solidifying within her. Beneath the surface, however, a torrent of self-doubt surged. Despite her affirmations and the growing sense of responsibility, the specter of her past lingered, haunting her with its insistent whispers. What if she failed? What if she fell short again, just as she had in countless other situations in life? Each tumultuous jolt of the aircraft accompanied the memory of missed opportunities and the constraints imposed by both herself and others, yet, in stark contrast to that self-doubt fluttering in her gut, an ember of strength radiated from the core of her being, pulsing in tandem with the aircraft's erratic motions. What if, instead, she reshaped the narrative of her past? The thought was revolutionary. Rather than reverting to the Michelle shackled by expectations and judgments, what if she embraced an identity of empowerment and decision-making? "Adjust pitch," the co-pilot instructed as the turbulence intensified. The clouds loomed closer, thick and murky, like a winding path through a dense fog. This very moment bore the weight of her transformation, a test of all that she could become if she dared to step into the unknown. "I'm ready," she breathed, her voice steady despite the violence around her. Her heart raced not from fear, but anticipation. This was not merely flight, this was a declaration of her potential. Each movement of her hands over the controls became an ethos of courage, each adjustment symbolic of navigating the thesis of her existence. As the plane pitched and yawed, Michelle's mind shifted into overdrive. The mechanics were still alien, yet she began to notice patterns: the way the engines screamed as the air thickened, how the wings flexed with resistance. Awareness seeped into her mind, she could almost decipher the plane's language. Suddenly, she was not just a navigator but an engaged participant in a cerebral dance of aerodynamics. Her mental obstacles melted away like clouds before the sun. She welcomed the turbulence, no longer regarding it as a harbinger of doom but as an invitation to better understand her strengths. The co-pilot's awe morphed into something tangible, mutual respect exchanged through focused glances. Soon, her self-doubt fragmented, the shadows of her past issued fewer threats. 50 feet to target altitude, the co-pilot announced, his voice steady with newfound faith. She pictured the horizon widening ahead, a vast expanse that held not just the cosmos but unlimited possibilities. However, her focus wavered as that shadow plane below re-entered her consciousness. It swirled with implications, a representation of her tangled aspirations. Am I ready to reach out? She pondered, emotional stakes elevating along with the plane. That shadow was a reminder, it could forge a new alliance or lead to unexpected collision. Michelle, altitude check. Her internal dialogue wrestled with the realities of possibility and risk that in those critical moments, where dreams wrestled with constraints, she experienced the synthesis of fear and courage, a volatile cocktail pushing her beyond the familiar. This was more than just flying, it was redefining her perception of destiny, and then, as she regained her focus and steadied the flight, a thought ignited in her mind: could those shadows below be lighthouses guiding her toward her true calling, illuminating a path she had never considered? With one last surge of will, she adjusted the yoke while plunging into the unknown at her fingertips. "Let us see where this takes us," she declared, her voice unwavering against the rising tide of uncertainty. Just then, an alert beeped loudly, jolting her back into the moment, a stern reminder of the unforeseen complexities ahead. With the storm brewing both outside and within, she was ready for what awaited her, her heart hammering against ambition as she steered into the unknown, daring to confront not just the turbulence above but the vast potential within. The moment had come to rise or fall, and she chose to follow the mysteries of flight into a future unseen. What lay beyond the clouds? The cockpit was engulfed by the shrill sound of alarms, slicing through the atmosphere's thick tension like a knife. Michelle's fingers clenched the yoke tighter, her gaze darting between the instruments, calculating their impact. She felt every muscle in her body taut, electrified, as the twin forces of self-doubt and determination waged war within her. Attention to detail, she reminded herself, focusing on the co-pilot's calm demeanor. Listening carefully as he described the emergency protocols, she forced herself to compartmentalize her escalating anxiety. The plane lurched again, and in that moment of chaos, clarity emerged. This was no longer just about flight, it was about control of both the aircraft and the narrative of her life. What had once felt like an overwhelming burden now appeared as an opportunity to redefine her limits. Each errant jolt of the plane seemed to resonate with the tumult she had faced throughout her career. In every job she'd had, there had been moments when she had been on the precipice of failure, each instance a reminder that she was not destined for greatness. But in the cockpit, as the challenge accelerated, she began to question that very script. Maybe failure was not an endpoint but a beginning. Adjust your attitude, and remember, confidence is key, the co-pilot's voice broke through her racing thoughts. She could hear the subtle encouragement beneath his professional tone, pulling her back to the present. As she followed his instructions, finely tuning the flight path, her mind began to unlock hidden resources. She remembered the countless hours of study in aviation school, the confidence drummed into her during simulator courses. That knowledge was not just theoretical, it pulsed within her, alive and waiting to be unleashed. This was a moment for her to live those lessons, to act on the skills she had cultivated over the years, but beneath the surface of this newfound fortitude, doubts lingered like dark clouds. Could she handle the complexities of leadership? Could she face the doubt of those who had once dismissed her aspirations? The thought of what lay ahead propelled her. She could visualize herself not just as a passenger on this flight of destiny, but as a pilot of her narrative, steering through uncharted skies and crafting her own story. As the altimeter stabilized and the altitude held steady, a flicker of pride surged within her. I can do this. The truth settled in her heart. She was not just fighting against failure, but she was fighting for her potential, a dazzling possibility that shimmered with every correction she made. The co-pilot, sensing her shift in energy, exchanged an impressed glance, one that communicated more than words ever could. It was a subtle acknowledgement of her transformation, recognizing not just her skill but her courage. However, the turmoil outside threatened to turn inward once more. She felt the weight of expectations pressing heavily. Was she only being accepted for her performance today, or would this newfound validation last? That shadow plane, her past self, loomed large. It whispered of potential failures lurking just out of sight. Michelle, we need a course adjustment, urged the co-pilot, disrupting her thoughts. She felt the pressure mount again, but she had already steeled herself. Yeah, I see it. Her voice was steady now, devoid of the hesitation that once paralyzed her. This directive was not just a response but a commitment, a calculated decision to embrace the chaos and direct it, to guide it where she needed it to go. With a deep breath, Michelle executed the maneuver, pushing forward into uncharted airspace. The clouds parted briefly, a glimpse of sun breakthrough illuminates ahead, its warmth beckoning her to a clearer horizon. As she navigated through this brief lapse in the storm, she felt a spark of revelation. The turbulence wasn't just a threat, it was a testament to her resilience, a reminder that discomfort often heralded growth. Even with the stakes raised, she understood, the flight was not only about reach but about forging her identity as the pilot of her future. Just as calm settled over the cockpit, her eyes caught movement through the window. Emerging from the clouds below, dark and stormy, another aircraft drew nearer, a potential collision, a metaphor for the past continuously attempting to impede her forward motion. Michelle's heart raced anew. The time had come to face the turbulence that would either define her or allow her to soar. The proximity of the oncoming aircraft jolted Michelle from her momentary calm, pulling her back to the urgent reality of the cockpit. The co-pilot's fingers flicked over the controls, navigating between the various systems, while her focus sharpened into a laser beam. The impending conflict felt very real now, much like the challenges she'd evaded throughout her career. There it was, a physical manifestation of her doubts and fears, and she had to confront it head-on. Traffic spotted at 2 o'clock, the co-pilot announced, his voice steady. But in Michelle's mind, the message reverberated with an entirely different context. This wasn't merely about diverting an aircraft, this was about taking ownership of her narrative, grappling with the looming shadows of her past that had shaped her insecurities. Can you identify the type of aircraft? She managed to ask, her own voice betraying nothing of the tempest within. Looks like a small private jet. We need to signal to them to adjust course, or we'll have to make a drastic move ourselves. His eyes flicked to her, gauging her readiness. It felt as if the aircraft was not merely a mechanical entity but an extension of their wills, each maneuver echoing decisions they had made in their lives. There was no room for hesitation now. Let us get the radio open, she said, her throat tightening as she spoke. The very act of claiming that space filled her with a rush of empowerment. The co-pilot acknowledged her directive effortlessly, but Michelle's mind spun into action. This wasn't just a moment of operation, it was a test of leadership, a chance to dismantle each doubt that had lingered like cobwebs throughout her career. In her past roles, she often felt overlooked, disregarded in the shadow of others. But today was different. I won't allow anyone to assume my limitations, she thought fiercely. As they established communication with the approaching jet, she felt the walls of doubt begin to tremble. With each crisp word over the radio, she could sense the dawning realization that she was in command. Respect wasn't given lightly, but it could be earned through decisive action. Private jet, this is control. We have you on the radar at your 1 o'clock. Requesting a bearing adjustment to avoid collision. Her voice carried the authority she had cultivated through years of navigation, knowledge, and resolve. Once the pilot of the other aircraft responded, acknowledging her directive, a surge of adrenaline fueled her pulse. Each second became a snapshot of clarity, laying bare the transformation she was undergoing in that cockpit. The fear she felt before had morphed into a fierce energy. It wasn't just about saving the flight, it was about commanding respect in her profession, about anchoring her worth in a world that often sought to undermine it. As they maneuvered away from the errant jet, she realized the broader implications of her choices. Each necessary decision today was a stitch in the fabric of her identity, one where she was now weaving confidence into every corner of her experience. And the turbulence? It had provided the backdrop for her evolution. Otherwise, she might have continued to live behind the veil of someone else's expectations. "Nice work, Michelle," the co-pilot said, flashing her a genuine thumbs up. His acknowledgement felt like an anchor in the storm, solidifying the progress she had made. But just as she allowed herself a breath of respite, a sudden warning blared, the instruments flickering once more. A technical glitch. It was as if the universe was challenging her further. The cockpit swelled with sound as alarms blared, and she could feel the murmur of doubt creeping back. Again. She muttered under her breath, but this time, fear wasn't her automatic companion. Instead, she felt a rush of focus, channeled through sheer resolve. The moment of truth loomed again, demanding she demonstrate whether the resilient spirit she had begun to embrace was real or merely temporary. With the going getting tougher, Michelle realized that the path ahead was still fraught with complexities. If the storm attempted to define her again, she would have to confront it head-on in order to solidify her newfound strength. The cockpit had transformed into a battleground of self-discovery with her heart as the compass. As she prepped for the next challenge, the weight of her past churned within her. It was time to tackle not just the technical failures but also the deep-seated fears that still threatened to ground her. What awaited as she pushed through the chaos would dictate whether she was merely surviving or if she was capable of truly soaring, once and for all. The alarms continued to wail, each piercing note a reminder that complacency was not an option in this high-stakes arena. Michelle's fingers hovered over the controls, suspended between a whirlwind of urgency and the deep-seated fear that had haunted her for years. Memories of past failures flickered in her mind, a career marked not just by accomplishments but also by moments of vulnerability which she had always struggled to confront. "Status report," she demanded, trying to breathe through the tension coiling in her chest. Her tone felt calibrated, but inside, an internal war raged. She wasn't merely addressing the equipment, she was announcing her emergence into authority. "Electrical system acting up," the co-pilot responded, unflinching. His calmness only fueled her desire to cement her place as a leader in their shared journey. "We need to restart the main power unit to stabilize the instruments." Michelle's heart raced at the thought of taking on the responsibility of rectifying a malfunction. Every instinct screamed to delegate, to let the co-pilot handle it. But another side of her, the side that had begun to understand the gravity of her own competence, pushed back against the tide of hesitancy. How many times had she wished for a platform on which to showcase her capabilities? This was her moment, whether she felt fully prepared or not. "Let us go through the checklist," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "I'll handle the power restart." The act of claiming this responsibility surged her with a fierce validation, acting as a catalyst for her long-dormant confidence. As they worked methodically through the procedures, Michelle remembered the countless hours spent studying protocols, the late nights dedicated to honing her skills. They formed the backbone of her knowledge, and now she understood their importance in the unfolding drama of the cockpit. She was not just reading from a script, she was a pilot navigating more than just machinery. She was reclaiming pieces of herself that had come under siege for far too long. "I'm initiating the restart now," she announced, fingers poised over the buttons, aware of the weight of each decision. As she engaged the sequence, a part of her grappled with the pervasive doubts that had followed her throughout her career. What if something goes wrong? What if I fail? Each question was an anchor, but this time, she wrested control away from them through the sheer force of her will. Power cycling in 3, 2, 1. A moment hung in the air, stretched thin by tension, before the lights flickered, stabilizing once more. Instruments returned to their normal interfaces, the alarms ceased, and the cockpit became eerily calm. Michelle felt the flood of relief wash over her, anchoring her in a newfound clarity. "Great job!" the co-pilot shouted, and this time, his praise felt like a symphony resounding through her mind. She had taken a step beyond simply surviving each challenge, she had thrived. But beneath the exhilaration lay an unsettling notion: deeper issues still lurked beneath the surface. The malfunction had triggered a deeper exploration within herself. What other fears had she failed to confront, lulled into submission by the comfortable rhythms of her previous choices? Looking out at the vast sky, Michelle felt an unsteady yet intoxicating resolve blooming within her. This was not over, the real transformations demanded further confrontation. Just as she began to visualize her path forward, an unexpected radar blip jolted her back to the present. "New traffic entering our airspace, and it's closing in fast," the co-pilot announced, urgency creeping back into his voice. The threat was tangible, and Michelle realized that the cockpit, once a sanctuary that had forged her self-worth, was beckoning her to rise once again. Just as she had begun to claim her power, another challenge loomed on the horizon, one that demanded her to fully embrace the pilot she had always been meant to become. Would she seize this opportunity or let her past shadow her future? The moment of vulnerability drew nearer, and she could no longer hide behind her previous successes. Confronting this new obstacle would not just require skill, it demanded an unyielding commitment to believing in herself. And with that thought igniting her determination, Michelle braced for what was to come. The cockpit buzzed with renewed urgency as the co-pilot monitored the radar screen, face taut with concentration. Michelle's heart drummed in rhythm with the alarms, an unsettling beat that pushed her instincts into overdrive. She turned her focus back to the instruments, breathing deeply to steady her racing thoughts. This was not just another emergency. It was a test of everything she had fought to become. "Identify the traffic's type," she instructed, her voice steady despite the tumult within. She realized that to lead effectively, she had to demonstrate confidence, which meant actively engaging and not letting panic dictate their actions. "Working on it," the co-pilot replied, fingers rapidly clicking along the keypad. "It looks like a fighter jet, and it's gaining on us fast." A rush of adrenaline coursed through Michelle. How had she arrived at such a pivotal moment? This was a defining instant, not just professionally but personally. She was being called to action, summoned to integrate her past struggles into a proactive force. No longer could she hide behind her walls of self-doubt. She felt something shift internally, a recognition that her challenges had forged resilience she hadn't previously acknowledged. "Do you think it's hostile?" she asked, forcing herself to maintain a calm facade. But her mind wrestled with doubt again. What if years of trauma and fear came rushing back now? "I can't confirm, but we need to prepare for evasive maneuvers." "I'll relay to command stop." Michelle interrupted. "We can't lose precious seconds. Let us go manual, I'll take control." Her hands clasped over the yoke with a firm grip, individual resolve coalescing into palpable purpose. The co-pilot hesitated. I need you to handle communications. Keep our frequency clear." She met his gaze, searching for a flicker of trust. What if the co-pilot hesitated? What would that say about her own capacity to lead? He nodded, and she sensed the subtle shift in her authority solidifying. Taking control of the aircraft was no longer an act of desperation, it was an embrace of her capabilities. As their roles became defined, she enacted an evasive maneuver, banking sharply to the right. Wind licked at the windows, but Michelle remained undeterred. She was in the cockpit of her destiny. "New radar contact confirmed," the co-pilot relayed through tightened lips. "It's a military jet, it's ordering us to alter course. Can we comply without compromising our safety?" Michelle asked, already contemplating options. The parameters of her decision-making had expanded, she wasn't standing at the edge of fear anymore. She was confronting and engaging with it. Potentially, but I can't guarantee their response if we don't. Michelle closed her eyes momentarily, the weight of responsibility transmuting into focus. This was the moment to define herself beyond her past. She would not cower beneath the mantle of fear but instead command respect through calculated risk. No, she decided. We're navigating away from the impending threat, not granting them control. With renewed determination, she adjusted the aircraft's heading, calibrating depth and altitude instinctively. Only now did she recognize how the intricate balances of airspace mirrored her internal conflicts. Just as she maneuvered the plane, she could navigate her emotional landscape. As the craft dipped into a steady glide, she caught a glimpse of the co-pilot, widened eyes betraying his surprise. His admiration propelled her inwardly, a motivating force reminding her that she was not alone in this endeavor. Each action became both a necessity and a statement of her evolution. Directly behind us, the co-pilot exclaimed. They're closing in. Heat flooded her senses. The moment of truth had arrived. With instincts honed by experience and a newly forged sense of self, Michelle sat at the crossroads. What choice would clarify not only her path in aviation but her life? Would she embrace fear as she had before, or would she confront it, continuing the work she had begun? As she leaned into the challenge, the feeling surged within her. This was not just about survival but about redefining who she was meant to be. The cockpit roared to life under her command, and with each breath, she felt the weight of her past lift. But the question still lingered: how far would she go to assert her newfound strength against the unforeseen threat emerging from the skies? The air bristled with tension, a raw prelude to complexities that lay ahead. Time felt compressible, each second morphing into an infinity ripe with possibility. Would she push onward into the unknown, or falter at the precipice of her newfound power? As the fighter jet flared into a stark view behind them, Michelle felt the adrenaline twist deeper within her. The stakes had changed. This was no longer merely about navigation but about asserting her identity. She focused intently, visualizing not just the aircraft but the path she had forged to that moment. With a steady hand, she adjusted their course further, the aircraft responding to her confident touch. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, she commanded, her voice cutting crisply through the chaos. The co-pilot's nod reinforced her resolve, a silent affirmation confirming she was not just leading in theory, she was leading in practice. Instinctively, Michelle noticed the throttle. The engine's roar heralded both a challenge and an opportunity. She reduced speed slightly, entering a strategic maneuver. If the military jet wanted proximity, she would decide where the boundary lay. She had the power to dictate their movements. The co-pilot shifted nervously. We're not playing cat and mouse here, Michelle. They're armed, and our orders. I don't care about the orders right now, she interjected firmly, her determination anchoring her. This is about survival and control. Inside her head, a cacophony of fears entertained the notion of a past riddled with hesitation and doubt. But here, in the cockpit, those uninvited thoughts held no dominion. She was not that woman who had been overwhelmed by uncertainty. Instead, she was evolving by the second into someone who could own her narrative. As she shoved the yoke, her decision initiated a steep ascent. The jet hounded closely behind, a predator closing the distance. Yet each upward thrust buoyed her self-belief, spiraling her past insecurities away. She wasn't just maneuvering an aircraft, she was maneuvering away from the girl who had once felt invisible. Bank left. The co-pilot shouted as the adversary shot forward, a sleek shadow against the fading daylight. They'll engage if we don't trust me. I have a plan. The words astonished even her, but clarity enveloped her like a shroud, birthing a tactical awareness she never knew she could wield. The insights from her training emerged, a whirlwind of techniques blending seamlessly with heightened instincts. Her mind surged with problem-solving patterns, trained reflexes revitalizing her prior struggles. It was time to reclaim her narrative not only as a pilot but as a power in her own right. She executed a sharp roll. The sudden shift disoriented her pursuer for a crucial moment, and Michelle capitalized on the opportunity, arcing the plane into a deceptive dip. The steep angle provided a hidden respite, just enough to strategize their next move. "What are we doing?" the co-pilot demanded, beads of sweat lining his forehead. The weight of his query flipped the emotional dynamic, and Michelle sensed the burden of leadership solidifying on her shoulders. "Turning the tides," she declared, reinvigorated. "We lead them into the canyon. It'll limit their agility, and we can loop back to safety." His quickening breaths filled the cabin, doubt mingling with reluctant awe. Michelle understood the gamble. If she executed this, it could splinter their chance for safety or redefine the limits of their engagement, and in that split second, she reflected on her journey, how stubborn refusal to disappear into the shadows had led her here, prompting her to trust herself against all odds. This was no longer merely an act of bravery, it was a visceral awakening of latent strength. She realized that fear could not shackle her. She possessed the tools to navigate both her inner storms and the wild world outside. As they sailed into the canyon, its walls a cauldron of sound and possibility, she prepared to brace for impact. Would her instinct lead them safely through or prove too risky even now? The very question gripped her. The air crackled with tension as they plunged deeper into the rock-hewn labyrinth. Would she navigate their way out at the cusp of uncertainty? Or would they be trapped, not just by the terrain but by her own ghosts? The aircraft threaded its way through the canyon, the walls rising steeply on either side like an indomitable fortress. Michelle gripped the yoke, her knuckles a stark contrast to the darkness outside, the rushing air filling her lungs with clarity. She could feel the pulse of the plane, a direct response to her intent, and with each calculated turn, she could almost sense the turbulence of her past beginning to dissipate in the wake of her courage. The military jet pursued, but Michelle's acute awareness of the surrounding terrain had become her greatest ally. The canyon's natural barriers created a stage for her to prove not just her competence as a pilot but to publicly declare the strength she'd long kept hidden. She had moved from the shadows of doubt to the forefront of decisiveness, ready to steer not just the aircraft but the course of her own life. "Keep an eye on them. Communicate any movements," she called out to the co-pilot, whose eyes widened in a mixture of concern and awe. "While I navigate, I need you focused and assertive," she added, her voice cutting through the anxiety in the cockpit. "We have the advantage. Trust the skills we know." As they dove deeper, the walls of the canyon flanking them felt like a reminder of all she had fought against: societal expectations, personal insecurities, and conflicts that had shaped her journey. Michelle had not just stepped into this cockpit to save a flight, she had come to save the narrative of her life, and every maneuver she executed represented a defiance against everything that had held her back. With each deft turn and timely adjustment, Michelle crafted their escape as if conducting an orchestra, commanding every note with precision. The military jet, although skilled, stumbled into the confines of the canyon, its agility diminished as Michelle's resolve surged. The moments shifted, uncertainty started to bleed away, replaced by a fierce sense of belonging. She wasn't floundering through chaos, she was navigating her victory. Then, in a decisive moment of clarity, she saw the gap ahead. "Now! Full throttle!" she shouted, a brazen challenge cloaked in oil-stained determination. The co-pilot executed her command without a moment's delay, and as they shot forward, the military jet became a distant roar, struggling to follow into the narrow opening. They veered smoothly upward, breaking free from the enclosure like a phoenix reborn, leaving behind the weight of compromised expectations. The skies opened wide before her, and as Michelle leveled out, the realization of what she'd accomplished washed over her. She had transformed from a hidden passenger into a respected pilot, demonstrating her prowess not merely through words, but through actions echoing with relentless conviction. The instinctual movements that had once eluded her now felt innate and unstoppable. "Flight 482, you are clear of the canyon. All systems stable," the voice over the radio announced, and in that moment, the co-pilot turned to her, a spark of understanding glowing in his eyes. He saw her recognition reflected back in a way she had always yearned for. "Outstanding work, Michelle," he said, the warmth in his tone offering validation that transcended mere acknowledgement. She had not only saved their flight, she had shattered the walls surrounding her past. Now in the open air, Michelle felt a buoyancy, a lightness that had eluded her for far too long. "I can do this." I was born for this, she whispered to herself, a mantra of empowerment solidifying her self-belief. Her journey toward personal fulfillment was not just about flying, it was about thriving. Resting her hand on the yoke, she gazed through the cockpit window at the horizon, where vibrant colors blended into the vastness, symbolizing endless possibilities. Each convolution of her past had cultivated resilience and strength. She felt her worth, firmly rooted in her journey, now fully aware that she had earned her place in the cockpit not only for herself but for every woman who aspired to defy limits, with hands steady and heart resolute. Michelle gripped the controls with a confidence she hadn't known before. She smiled, embracing the truth that challenges did not define her, she defined herself. The wings steadied beneath her, and she soared into the expanse of the sky, ready to navigate whatever came next. Michelle had not only conquered the skies, she had claimed her narrative, demonstrating to the world and to her daughter that limitations were made to be broken. She was a pilot, a force in her own right, and nothing could dim her newfound brilliance. Now is the moment to act. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.